Good evening. Welcome to Economics 330, Global Trade and Political Economy, City University of New York, MEC. Today, of course, is November 11th, 2025, and I am Professor Felix Obi. As usual, we are going to go through a formal lecture, and after the lecture, I will turn off the recording and then take questions and office hours as necessary. So we have just a little bit to get to today. So I'm gonna get right to it. Um, in the previous two classes, we have covered the following topics: international monetary relations, one, and the second topic is global trade relations. As we continue in this 12th week and our third of three segments that began in Module 8, we will focus on trade regionalism. Some scholars see regional trade agreements, or RTAs, which is distinct from multilateralism as expressed by the World Trade Organization, as a stepping stone to eventual worldwide liberalization of trade. However, others see them as obstacles to global free trade. Economists describe regional trade agreements as existing at 5 stages or levels of integration, and these include Stage 1, Free Trade Agreement, or FTAs, where member states eliminate tariffs and other restrictions on substantially all trade with each other. But each member can retain its own trade policy. Thus, a free trade agreement, a free trade area poses less of threat to national sovereignty and is more to states with politically percent of regional trade agreements today are free trade agreements. The United States Mexico Canada Agreement, or USMCA, is an example of an FTA. The second is Customs Union, or CU. A customs union has the same characteristics as a free trade area, plus common external tariff, or CET, towards outside states. So in addition to the fundamentals of a free trade agreement, a customs union also includes a common external tariff towards outside states. Put differently, in a customs union, the member countries do not charge tariffs on goods traded between them, and they set the same tariff on goods imported from third countries or countries outside of the customs union territory. A CU normally creates institutions to administer the common tariff, and CU members have less ability to make independent decisions. I guess that's the short end of it. Compared with free trade agreements, the number of customs unions is relatively small. The most important customs union is the European Union. But as we will soon learn, the EU is more than a customs union. For instance, the EU is in customs union with Andorra, San Marino, Monaco, and Turkey, with the exception of certain goods. And while Turkey's membership of a customs union with the EU is recognized as having played a significant part in transitioning its economy from agrarian to industrial. However, the free trade agreements signed by the EU do not extend to Turkey. This is important to point out. As such, EU's customs union extends to non-EU member countries. So, which is why I preceded this comment by saying that EU is more than a customs union. And as we go on, you would see that the European Union, or EU, is more than a customs union in more ways than one. Consequently, there is an asymmetric trade relationship where EU's foreign trade agreement partners can export to Turkey tariff-free, while maintaining tariffs on Turkish goods imported into EU's free trade agreement partners. Unless, of course, they also conclude a separate FTA agreement with Turkey. The EU and Turkey are, however, in negotiations to amend their customs union agreement to add Turkey to EU present and future FTAs. I should also note that Turkey, I believe, now prefers to be referred to as Turkey. So, big mistake on my part. The third is common markets. A common market has the same characteristics as a customs union, plus the free mobility of factors of production, i.e., labor and capital, among members. As I mentioned, the EU is more than a customs union. It is indeed a common market that includes free mobility of factors of production. The increased labor mobility induces members to establish similar health, safety, educational, and social security standards so that no country's workforce maintains a competitive advantage. Successful common markets are rare, but they require high levels of integration, such as in the EU. The fourth is economic union. An economic union has similar characteristics to a common market. An economic union harmonizes members' industrial, regional, transportation, fiscal, and monetary policies. A full economic union also includes a monetary union with a common currency. As discussed, 20 out of 27 EU member states are currently part of the Economic and Monetary Union with the adoption of the euro as their common currency. And the fifth is political union. A political union has the characteristics of an economic union and also harmonizes members' foreign and defense policies. A fully developed political union is more akin to a federal political system than an agreement among sovereign states. It is important to note that these stages of integration are models that do not fully translate in reality. USMCA, which is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement as an example, is at stage one, which is an FTA, but its provisions, until recently I might add, also require more openness towards foreign investment, which is commonly identified with a common market. Furthermore, regional trade agreements in the global south that describe themselves as custom unions and common markets have not actually reached those levels of integration. As an example, the Caribbean Community, or CARICOM, was originally established as a customs union in 1973 with the Treaty of Chaguaramas established CARICOM Single Market and Economy, or CSME, a more advanced stage of integration that aspired to go beyond a customs union. However, CSME is still work in progress in its goal to facilitate the free movement of goods, service, labor, and capital. In addition to the existing free movement of goods under the customs union framework. Demonstrably, free trade agreements are much more common than customs union and single market because they do not require difficult negotiations over a common external tariff. Although these stages are only models, they do, however, provide a general guidance to the process by which nation states become more integrated. This is especially true of the European Union, the most advanced of the regional trade agreements. Coming full circle, let us conclude by examining the theoretical perspectives between regionalism and the international political economy, PE. In some cases, multilateralism and regionalism are competing approaches to trade. Whereas multilateralism contributes to global trade liberalization, regionalism may divide the world into competing trade blocs. However, open regionalism can break down national trade barriers and serve as a stepping stone rather than obstacle to global free trade. Regional trade agreements following open regionalism abolish barriers on substantially all trade within the regional trade agreement and lower barriers for outsiders. It is also helpful to acknowledge there are sources of conflict between the countries in a regional trade agreement, and these include reduction of economic sovereignty and independence of economic policies. A typical example of this tension and the social challenges that can arise when citizens of a country fear that they are losing economic sovereignty, I think is best exemplified by Brexit, which was the referendum in the United Kingdom that voted in favor of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union because British citizens concluded at the time, um, recent events would suggest that they concluded incorrectly, that the loss of sovereignty, that the economic benefit of being a member of the European Union was not worth the perceived loss of sovereignty, and actual loss of sovereignty to be fair. But in trying to regain their sovereignty, they lost scale and bargaining position, so a bargaining advantage. So, but it is fair to acknowledge that perceived and or real reductions of economic sovereignty can be a source of tension. The second is unequal levels of human and physical infrastructure, in particular, transportation networks, unequal access to capital to finance trade, and the lack of regulatory coherence in non-common market agreements. These factors can lead to conflict between countries in a regional trade agreement. Now, let us conclude this week's lecture by highlighting the three learning objectives for the week. The first is to differentiate between the World Trade Organization and regional trade agreements, or RTAs, to which the World Trade Organization is a global organization that promotes free trade among its members, while regional trade agreements, or RTAs, are preferential trade agreements between two or more countries, potentially creating exceptions to the WTO's principle of non-discrimination. Accordingly, the WTO operates a global system of trade rules that facilitates trade among all member countries and operates on the principles of non-discrimination or most favored nation treatment and transparency. The WTO also provides a forum for trade negotiations, resolves trade disputes, until recently, I might add. Furthermore, the WTO monitors trade policies for a wide range of sectors, including trade in goods, services, and intellectual property. Unlike regional trade agreements, the WTO has a broad membership that encompasses a wide range of countries and economies. Conversely, regional trade agreements, or RTAs, are agreements between two or more countries to reduce or eliminate trade barriers such as tariffs and promote trade and economic integration within a specific geographical. It is fair to also note that by their nature, RTAs can be said to be discriminatory as they grant preferential treatment to trade between member countries, thus potentially violating WTO's principle of non-discrimination. The proponents of RTAs, original trade agreements, which are typically formed by a smaller group of countries within a specific region, will, however, counter that it facilitates trade and economic cooperation among member countries, often going beyond the scope of the WTO's multilateral agreements. Despite these seeming tensions between multilateralism and regionalism, the WTO recognizes the role of RTAs, original trade agreements, and thus allowing them under specific conditions, which includes notification requirements to WTO and adherence to certain rules, such as covering substantially all trade. The second objective is to describe and explain this WTO. RTAs, of course, is regional trade agreements, and WTO is World Trade Organization. To which I would say that according to the World Trade Organization, regional trade agreements have risen in number and reach over the years, including a notable increase in large plurilateral agreements. While non-discrimination among trading partners is one of the core principles of the WTO, however, regional trade agreements, which are reciprocal preferential trade agreements between two or more partners, constitute one of the derogations, but are authorized under the WTO, subject to a set of rules. As of January 22nd, 2025, 373 RTAs were in force. This corresponds to 615 notifications from the World Trade Organization members, counting goods, service, and accessions separately. The third, of course, learning outcome is to identify and describe the different forms of regional trade agreement, which we have just covered. And again, these include the 5 stages of levels of integration, which is one, free trade area; second, customs union; third, common market; fourth, economic union; and fifth, political union. Now, this concludes our 3-part series that began in Module 8. And for next week, our focus will be on multinational corporations. That is the folks who actually run the industries that deliver goods and services to us, anywhere from General Motors to Shein to Temu and what have you. And with that, I am going to stop the recording, take questions, and office hours as necessary.